On and on.
One of the most interesting questions in tech right now is if you were a smartphone maker and you're making a new budget phone to sell for 400 bucks. Basically, you get to choose one thing to make special, one amazing feature about your phone, and then the rest you have to save money on. The question is, what feature do you choose? Matter of fact, let's play a little game. Let's say you have $17 to build your own smartphone. Not to buy, but to sell. And you have a bunch of things that you need to spend money on. You know, it's a more complex list than this, obviously, but for the sake of the game, simple. You have limited money. For $5, you can make something excellent, special. For $3, you can make it average. And then for $1, you make things poor, just trash. So my gut reaction is to make a great screen. Like, you gotta have the thing you look at be excellent, and then good specs, I guess give me average battery life and design, but then that's already 14, so that leaves poor software, poor marketing, and poor camera. I want at least an average camera. I mean, maybe that's just me, but okay, how about great screen, average specs, average battery, average camera? Then that leaves poor design, poor marketing, and poor software. And poor software is rough. It's a fascinating choice. And obviously the prices, in our little game don't line up with reality. And there are way more things you have to choose as a smartphone maker. But you can see the list of trade-offs is a lot. So I asked this on Twitter earlier today, and almost everyone responding spends $1 on marketing, because who cares about marketing your phone? Nobody wants to blow extra money on the phone for marketing. But they're answering from the perspective of what phone would you buy, when this is supposed to be what phone would you try to sell the most units with. And not everybody wants to make the marketing trade-off and spend the extra money and give up the cut to carriers and all that comes with the marketing, but you can see that's also a shift in the trade-offs as well. I think if you did a poll of what most people care about in a phone they're buying, they would say software and camera are both pretty important. So as you're considering how many you sell, you kind of have to trickle down and start to lose features that aren't those important things. Anyway, this is the Poco X2. This is the phone that got me thinking about all this in the first place. It's the successor of maybe one of the most hyped phones of the last 2 years, the original Poco phone. But this one is, again, not coming to the US as this phone, but it converts to about a little more than $300 US, which is a great price for a smartphone. There's also the Poco F2 and Poco F2 Pro, which is closer to 500 bucks, but I definitely want to get my hands on it. It looks impressive and the specs look sweet. And it's yet another example of how you can make those choices in a budget phone. But I'm looking at the Poco X2. The display here is clearly where they're spending some money. Seems like the $4 to $5 option, it's 120 hertz 1080p display. Just about as good and as fast as you're gonna find in a phone this cheap. It gets plenty bright too, it's big, and it translates to just the phone feeling super smooth all the time, which is great in any budget phone. And then on specs, this phone has a Snapdragon 730G, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, mine has 6, UFS 2.1 storage. So, I'd say they spent about their $3 on specs here. It's not super high end, obviously. It's not the 865 or anything, but it's also not trash. It's average specs, what you'd expect to find here. And then the battery is a 4,500 milliamp hour battery. So that's nice that they're not trying to go super thin or anything crazy like that. Looks pretty decent on paper, but let's remember that's powering a large 6.6 inch 120 hertz bright display. So that's something to keep in mind. But they did include a 27 watt fast charger in the box. So again, it's feeling like a 3 for battery. Then for hardware and design, this one's interesting. They don't really need to get too fancy since they already have this nice screen to lean on. So essentially what we have here is a Redmi K30. Like, it's the same phone, literally. Now it actually says designed by Poco on the back, but it's not. It's designed by Xiaomi. I don't know why. I mean, I understand rebranding, and I know you can say Poco anywhere on the phone, but designed by Poco is a bit weird. Either way, that's what we're working with. And it's got the metal rails, the glass back. It's got a nice weight to it, and it doesn't really creak or flex at all when you twist it like some other budget phones that are plastic do. And the camera bump, too, is pretty manageable. It's not zero, so it does still rock if you try, but at least it's in the middle. There is no wireless charging, even though it's a glass back, And they say it's splash proof, but there is no official IP, water, or dust resistance rating because, you know, these things cost money. But look, hardware design also includes things like your headphone jack at the bottom, nice. The vibration motor, bad in this phone, not good. And also things like the fingerprint reader here. It's on the power button here on the side, which I like. If you have the choice between a crappy in-screen fingerprint reader or something else, if you don't have the tech, just do it this way. Just do it on the proven side of the phone where you have to touch it anyway to unlock it. I like this. Overall, that mixed bag feels like another 3 for hardware and design. And then speaking of that camera bump on the back, quad cameras. There is a 64 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and then you add a depth camera, and then another 2 megapixel macro camera. What? Who keeps asking for these 2 megapixel macro cameras? Do you just want to be able to say you have quad cameras and that's like the cheap one that you can throw in to say you have another camera and no one gets mad? But like no one uses it, so why even put it there? I don't know. Another depth camera. Truth is though, this phone's primary camera actually impressed me for the price. It's not Pixel level or iPhone SE level good, those are special, but the photos I took with it were usually fairly detailed, had nice dynamic range and sharpness. Now, as soon as you get to less than ideal lighting, noise, especially in the shadows, cranks way up, and it never really knows exactly how to deal with reds. It felt the most inconsistent. Sometimes it oversaturates them, sometimes it makes skin tones weird, but overall they definitely didn't skimp on the cameras. They're not the trash cameras I've seen in some other budget phones, so I'll feel like that's another 3. Then there's software. The software is MyUI 11, and just being honest, I've never really liked this skin, and there's nothing happening here to change my mind with that. Now, the nice thing about Android is you can change a lot of this, but it does take some work, but some of it is nearly impossible to fully abandon. Also, fun fact, the dual hole punch cutout for the selfie camera is actually 2 cutouts with a software oval drawn around and between them. Also, software, as we know, has an effect on image quality in the camera, so that's like kind of tied to that. Just saying. Now, it's hard for me to say what they spent on marketing because I'm not them, and I'm also not in the market that they are trying to sell this phone to. But if you just drop a 1 in there, this phone, that actually adds up to the 17 that we were budgeting with at the beginning. So yeah, there's a lot of varying budget phones out there right now, this being one of them. This sparked my conversation in my head about it. That sounds a little crazy, but that's the high refresh rate one. If you want the budget phone with the high refresh rate screen, potentially at the expense of some other things, this is the one option you should be looking at. But the whole point of that game I tweeted out earlier is there's a wide variety of all these different budget phones because there's a wide variety of different answers that people give. And this is why the iPhone SE was such a massive disruptor in this budget world. That's a $400 phone, and when you fill it out, you go down the list, it kind of seems to mess with the balance a little bit. And even though Apple doesn't have to spend anything extra on the software, that software is super valuable for many people, super important having an iPhone for that price. That's a big deal. So when it seems like you're going over the allotted 17 points, that's when it's a good indicator that you're actually getting a good deal. I also looked through some notable responses. Rene Ritchie's, he basically built a Pixel 4a, kinda. Go big on the software and the camera, and then, you know, whoops, the battery is going to be kind of trash, sorry. Mr. Who's the Boss spent extra on a great battery, but then maybe you have some concerns about the software, and also by proxy, therefore also the camera a little bit. This guy Victor, I saved his tweet, said the software is what makes the phone usable, so he spent more on the software, understandably. But then, if you look at his list, now you have trash specs. And how usable is a phone after a year or two if the specs are trash? I like this one, the Dave 2D method. Spend all the money on marketing and then don't actually ship a phone. And Superstaff straight up asked for more money to make a better phone. So obviously it's a hard challenge and there is no right answer. But I would love to follow up, maybe if there's a smartphone company out there willing to share this sort of information on like how much do these different parts cost? Remember when there were companies leaving out NFC in their phones? Or phones like this continue to leave out wireless charging? Like how much does each part cost and what are the trade-offs for really putting together a phone of a certain price? Obviously they probably can't say how much the carrier partnerships are worth, but that'll be interesting. Either way, I'm curious, what would you spend on each part of your ideal phone? I'll leave the $17 question down below the like button if you want to give it your best shot in the comments. I'll hang out there and maybe give a thumbs up to the ones you think you would actually buy. Either way, that's been it. Thank you for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.